Thank you, Spiria, for hosting this. It's really fantastic that we have this beautiful space here. So my name is Ian Ghent, and this is Bryan Chuinkam. We're from WiseWithData, and we're literally just across the river in Zigbee complex over there. We wanted to kind of start to engage with the community again after COVID and really try and get some of these meetups. So I really appreciate in putting together this and getting us all together. So what we do, and just talk a little bit about what we do, is we're kind of the leaders in a very, very boutique niche space, which is there is a very old legacy analytics platform called SAS. You may have heard of it. Essentially, it is a 50-some-odd-year-old coding platform, kind of similar to COBOL, and all the Fortune 1000 companies, or most of them, use SAS in some way, and they're starting to look at modernizing that. So they've built all kinds of data workflows and stuff like that. So what we do is we've built an automated engine that helps them move this into Python and PySpark. So this is kind of the way in which we do stuff. We do it as essentially a consulting engagement, and we've been doing this now for 9 years, and we've built a great business doing that. The automation that we've built essentially kind of leverages, we're Python from start to finish. Everything that we do is based in Python. Web apps that we've developed are in Django, and the code that we're generating is predominantly PySpark-based code. So for those that aren't familiar with what PySpark is, it's an API in Python that allows you to access scalable big data analytics capabilities. So the ability to kind of munch data, the ability to do machine learning algorithms, et cetera, based in that. So the purpose of today's talk is really to talk about our journey and looking at Python from a user interface perspective. So we've built a number of kind of purpose-built applications that we need to accomplish certain tasks in an automated way when we're engaging with our customers. And our original kind of idea was really just to build the engine and have a very light interface around it, because ultimately we're just trying to push a button and get code out the other side. The challenge with that is that we do need to interact with that. We need to kind of change different options and different settings, and we have a number of other tools that we need to look at to kind of solve this entire problem. We originally started, just as most people have, with building UIs in tkinter, and really struggled with that. Anything more than a little bit of complexity, and tkinter is just not a very user-friendly language. So we set out to try and see what else we could find. So we could have kind of just accepted that and just kind of kept building on top of this, but we really kind of said, maybe there's something better. So we looked at PyQt, we looked at a number of other options in the market. None of them really fit what we wanted to do. They, for whatever reason, they weren't properly maintained. They were cross-platform. They were proprietary, like PyQt, where from a commercial standpoint, you've got to do a commercial license. And a lot of them just don't have a lot of modern features and take care or make use of modern hardware. So we did kind of do this search, and what we were looking for was essentially a Python library that was really simple to get started with, because one of the things that we want to help our customers with is finding those same alternatives for them. So as they engage in moving from SAS to Python and PySpark, we want to be able to be those experts that can show them exactly how they can do these new things in Python. So we want to be able to have that library at our fingertips and say, hey, you built this library, or you built this application in SAS, and there is a UI library in SAS as well. It's really, really old, but people have built stuff in that. And so we wanted to be able to kind of have that simple starting point, but also be able to scale that up to large projects. So it was important that we have something that in an afternoon I could build a prototype. Wanted it to be well maintained, wanted it to be cross-platform, and open source, and ideally have kind of a modern style to it and modern features. That was kind of the original idea behind what we were searching for. We experimented with a number of different tools and we came across this. So this is DearPyGUI. It is a minimal dependency. It is tiny. It's 3 megabytes on Py2Py. And it is essentially a library that was built from another library, which is called DearPyGUI. And what it gives you is kind of a modern theme and style control, so you can kind of build out complex UIs with themes and all kinds of things like that. It is multi-threaded and it uses GPU rendering, so it's taking advantage of modern hardware, which is also a huge bonus. It is cross-platform. It's a permissive open source license, and there are already kind of built-in demo and developer tools into the tooling itself. And there's lots of examples code out there to go upon. The other bonus that it has is that it has a number of graphical data graphing capabilities. So this comes in the form of pie charts and bar graphs and stuff like that, but also a node editor. So you can drag and drop this here, these here are the node editor pieces, and these are incredibly flexible in terms of what you can put in them. So they can represent data workflows, they can represent different calendar events, etc. You can do all kinds of really interesting things there. It has become fairly popular, so there's now 2 million downloads of it. But we really, really like it. And we think that the community would really benefit from being able to learn about it more. It is very new. So to just kind of give you some history, it was started by a couple gentlemen from the States, Jonathan Hofstad and Preston Cawthron. They were engineers looking for a Python UI that essentially allowed them to do all kinds of things with 3D graphics, as well as kind of doing some scientific and data science applications. When they looked out in the market, they didn't really see anything that fit what they were looking for, but they had a background in C++. So I think they're far more comfortable in C++, which is really ironic because they created this library is much more Pythonic than any of the other libraries that we've seen, which is fascinating. It is based upon this toolkit called DearPyGUI, and there was a couple extensions to that, implot and imnodes. So the DearPyGUI was created by Omar Kornut and Evan Peasant, and Johan Buzanski created the imnodes and implot respectively. It has kind of gone through a little bit of a change over the time period. So Jonathan and Preston were very heavily involved in building this out. And they've since taken a bit of a step back. I think from a life perspective, they're much more family oriented than they were when they created this. So they've created this wonderful application, and I think now it's on the whole community to help support this and continue to maintain it. It is being maintained, but I think there is an opportunity to kind of build upon that. So I wanted to showcase a few of the applications and some of the things that people have built with it. So here's just a snapshot of a few. You've got a game here, a very simple game. This is some dynamic flow simulation where it's simulating, I think it's certain particles and in the space of vectors that are driving those particles. There's an image editing app here, and there's a flowchart app up there. Those are just a few snapshots of what people have done with this. The really cool thing about DearPyGUI is that it is both a retained mode UI library, so it's very simple to just, hey, I want to create the button here, I want to create this button here. But because the underlying library, which is DearPyGUI, that is a immediate mode library. So you actually get to flip back and forth if you want. And what this gives you is the advantage of being able to do these animations, being able to build games as well, all in the same library and have that fine-grained control, but have a very simple entry point to not have to do too much work to get your UI. So what have we done with it? So our Sprocket robot tool, which is the kind of thing that we've been focused the most on over the years, we kind of do this code conversion aspect, and here's the UI here, and we'll jump into that in a second. But essentially, what we've built with this is the original version of this was, as I mentioned, tkinter. It was ugly. It had not nearly as much functionality as we have now, but I would say it took us longer to build out simply because of the challenges that we had. So I'm going to flip over here and just do a quick demo of what this looks like. So this is the actual live application. I'm going to just go ahead and import some code here. So we have a piece of SAS code. So this is this legacy SAS code. It's about 200 lines or so of code. I'm going to go ahead and convert that. So our engine automatically converts that very, very quickly. As you can see, everything's very nice and responsive. There's no lag to any of this. It's the whole thing, including the engine, was done in under a second. And it gives you the ability to we've dynamically generated some options here, being able to have some checkboxes, etc. Show you some of the graphs that we've built. So this gives us the ability to understand what that code is. It allows us to also build this the step chart, which kind of shows the flow of each step and how big was that step. And then we've also leveraged that node editor to show kind of the data flow. So here's an example of, we've got these various SQL steps. They're reading in data, they're reading out data. We're able to kind of show what the SQL was that provided that. So this gives us an understanding of that code as we're going through and converting it. So I'm now going to hand, this is kind of at a high level how we've divided up the presentation. I'm talking about all the strategic advantages, and now Bryan is I'm going to hand it over to him, and he's going to walk you through actually designing a UI and how he's been able to do that. And I'll hand it over there.
All right, thank you, Ian. So yes, as Ian mentioned, what I will be doing is walking you through a demo, like a simple application that I created just to highlight some of these differences that Ian had mentioned. So I'll be using tkinter up against DearPyGUI, which I guess to some who are familiar would say is not fair, but I chose tkinter because it is what comes with Python, so most people will be familiar with it. So it's an easy, I believe it will be easier to grasp. So for the demos, there were some things I took into consideration when building the demo. The first thing is typically you're building your graphical user interface to interact with some type of data on the back end. So I factored that into the demo, and typically you might not be the only user, so you do need to put some data validation or restrictions in there as well. So I tried to factor that in as well. Also try to keep as many of the default settings as possible, also to help highlight some of those differences, and trying to keep the code as readable as possible. So trying to add as many comments and spacing such so that in a real world situation, you're working on code with someone, they need to be able to pick up where you left off. So what I'm going to do next is I'll first show you the GUIs, first one created with tkinter, the next one created with DearPyGUI, and then we can kind of do a comparison of some parts of the code to kind of highlight those differences. So the application that I built is a simple horoscope application. We'll start with the Tkinter version. So all this application does is it prompts the user to enter a day and a month. When they click for today's horoscope, it pulls in the zodiac name, zodiac sign, and the horoscope for the day. And after you've done a few horoscopes, you can click on the plot button to get a graph, a chart of the top 3 horoscopes that were selected. So again, trying to emphasize on the graphical as the front end, as I guess you can say, of the application. Both of them use, both GUIs, both front ends use the same backend to pull in the data. It is a static backend, so I just have a data structure that has all of that in place. I'm not pulling it through any web APIs or anything like that. So I'll walk you through it. At the top, basic menu bar with few options. So you see that within the settings, there's sub options there. Then we see, so with regards to setting these constraints, for example, we see that you can't go below 1 for the month and the day, and for the month, there's upper limit of 12. But with Tkinter, one thing I'll highlight is that to, for example, set limits for what the user can enter, I would have to create a separate function to handle that. And we'll compare it to DearPyGUI later. So what I'll do now is I'll just put in, so when you click today's horoscope, you get the zodiac sign, name, and the horoscope here in the text box. Very simple. We'll do a few of them. I don't know if anyone feels like saying a day and month for us to try. If anyone's open to shouting out 2 numbers that I can add to here.
You got a birthday coming up? March 26th.
March 26th. So March 26th. So Aries, and then with every step you take today, you're approaching a major turning point. So you've got to be primed and ready to act when you see a great opportunity heading your way. So just so yeah, so we do a few of them, and do one more, and let's click the plot button. Oh, really? Look at that. A few days away from mine, actually. So when we click the plot button, get a basic chart there with the legend that highlights, okay, Aries was in red, we had 3, then we had the Taurus, green 2, and then Aquarius, we had 1 selection for that. So high level, that was with the Tkinter option. So now I'll run the DearPyGUI option. And again, keep in mind that a lot of what you're seeing is the default, the way it comes up when you add the various widgets. So within DearPyGUI, again, you see the menu option. By default, when there's a sub menu, it gives you that arrow. So it's kind of intuitive that, okay, there's more options within the settings options. Have the same type of constraints for the lower and upper limits. One difference, without having to create a separate callback function, being able to handle if the user enters the wrong information or invalid data, and if it's closer to the upper limit, switches it to the upper limit, closer to the lower limit, switches to the lower limit. And for this as well, I will get a few, I can move this down. Oh, sorry, I clicked on the plot too quickly. But yeah, so it essentially operates the same way. You get the same information. This chart that it created, again, since I only put in 1, it just pulled alphabetically the next 2 options, which was 0, 0. But this chart is created is pretty much the default option. And you can see when you right click on it, you have options such as moving the legend and other options with the chart itself that you can play around with. And this is all stuff that is set up by default. So now if we look through the code, just let me change the view so that that's distracting. There you go. So when you look through the code, just from with everything collapsed, you can already see that the Tkinter option is a lot more lines than the DearPyGUI option. Starting from the top, just real quick, the Tkinter requires more imports. because something like the image isn't a built-in option to handle that within Tkinter, but there is with DearPyGUI. In terms of creating the layout, this is where one of the big differences comes into play. Within to create the window is more or less the same. You create the window and then you put your widgets onto the window. How you put them onto the window within Tkinter is with each widget you create, you specify if it's going to be on top, I guess on top or in another item, and then you have to say where on the grid you want to place it. Within DearPyGUI, because they use context managers, it's essentially more intuitive. So if we look, for example, at the menu bar, the way the menu bar was created is kind of the way you write it. So you say you want a menu bar. Within that menu bar, you want an option called File. Within File, you want the Save and Save As, and you want Settings. Within Settings, you want the two other options. So it just kind of flows. So this highlights making the code a lot more readable than, for example, with Tkinter, where you have to add a lot more specifications. The next thing I'd want to highlight is the plot creation, which in DearPyGUI was just a matter of, let me expand it here. Yes, so to create the plot in DearPyGUI, was just 10 lines of code. Again, with Context Manager, I want a plot. Within that plot, I want to add the plot legend. I want x-axis, can put in a label for the x-axis, set the limits. I want a y-axis, and these are the 3 bar charts that I want to draw. Within Tkinter, creating a plot it's a more tedious process because you essentially have to write the code to more or less draw each of the bars onto the chart, and you also have to write the code to create the legend. So the same chart with Tkinter was 24 lines of code, with DearPyGUI was 10 lines of code. So these were just a few things I wanted to share to kind of highlight the differences between DearPyGUI and Tkinter. And I believe this is one of the reasons why we chose DearPyGUI, because just working with others, making your code a lot more readable, and it also makes it a lot easier to maintain. One thing I failed to mention, I haven't mentioned yet, is that within DearPyGUI, so the way I built the layout, I used a table structure, which for me was just easier to visualize. That I wanted a table with 3 columns. So most of my content was in the middle column, just helped me to center it. And on the left and right side columns, I just had added spacers and then put everything in the center. So for me, but you don't have to do that. So if you're, you don't have to do that. You could have created the GUI by just adding each of the widgets, and DearPyGUI would just, I guess, add them as they're written. So it kind of populated that way. So yeah, so at a high level, I believe that was what I wanted to highlight with the demo. I can make the code available because it was just something that I built, and I am open to any feedback with anyone that might be more familiar with Tkinter and might be able to point out that, hey, there might be changes that would have made things easier, but yeah.
Thanks so much, Bryan. So, what we really wanted to share with you is how impressed we are with this library and how simple it is to get going with it. This example was great because it just showed in a very small amount of code the differences between things, and I really appreciate you putting this together, Bryan. For us, it's been a huge game changer to be able to prototype things really quickly. As you saw here, being able to lay stuff out in a tabular way allows you to, even if you are a web developer, and what it'll allow you to do is, instead of building wireframes and drawing them out, you can literally just kind of build your prototype application in here in an afternoon, see how it's going to work, and then translate that into the web We found that it's just so easy and so intuitive to work with that we often just will build something as a quick throwaway prototype and then kind of formalize it later. I wanted to open up the audience for any questions that folks have. Yeah.
What are some challenges you face with the platform?
I think the main one was when we adopted it, there was not a lot of information out there. There was not a lot of examples because of how new this is, because it was only kind of started in 2021. I think that's the biggest thing is the community is starting to build now around it, but it certainly posed quite a challenge. We had to kind of do a lot of experimentation to figure out certain things. You know, there are some quirks to it. There's some things that we think could be done better, but they're not fundamental to it. It's just kind of the way that it's been implemented. And you know, I don't think that that's unique to DearPyGUI either. I think all the UI libraries have their own idiosyncrasies. But I think the main one holding us back was really just to have examples of out in the community of how to do stuff. And I think that's getting there now. And that's one of the big motivations why we're doing this presentation is to try and kind of build a more supportive community around it.
Yeah, just for people online, if you don't mind repeating the question.
Yeah.
Further questions, but so I'm familiar with PySide. Are there any other libraries that you tried and decided weren't a good fit?
So we looked at PyQt, we looked at PySide, for example, and one of the things that really attracted us towards this was a lot of the built-in capabilities and how lightweight it was. So we have some client-side tools that we implement as well. So we have essentially a crawler that our customers use to kind of get information about their own environment. And so having that lightweight UI we don't have to have a commercial license for this. It's a permissive license was one of the aspects of it. But having some of these built-in tools, the graph capabilities, the node capabilities, those were definitely bonuses. And then for me specifically, I just found the context manager so intuitive that everything kind of fits where it's supposed to in the code, where I find a lot of these other UI libraries, you got to define this up here and then you plug it in down here. This really reads the same way as it actually gets rendered. It's very intuitive from that perspective. Yeah.
So from a testing perspective, how would you, like if you had a client that was building on a huge GUI, how would I go about, say, leveraging Python so that the GUI was performing what it was supposed to do?
So you would kind of divide your code up into the back end components and then the front end components, and you know, we've got automation on the back end for a lot of this. So we leverage PyTest and we leverage CI/CD tests for a lot of the code conversion aspects. And then the UI is tested in different ways. We don't have as much automation around the UI specifically, but there are UI automation technologies that you can leverage too.
Your clients are basically belonging to which domain, and what are the requirements which this library is fulfilling for them?
So our clients are pretty much a lot of the Fortune 1000 companies. They're looking to migrate away from SaaS. So they're not necessarily using this UI themselves. We're offering this as essentially a conversion as a service. So we're doing the work, but we need that automated tooling and that ability to kind of have this workbench, if you will, to be able to do this in the most efficient way possible. To give you some example, like our customers come to us and they say, we have 500,000 lines of SaaS code and we need it migrated in the next 2 months. And so we need to be able to have that automated tooling to move as fast as they need us to be able to do that.
So what are the limitations for using
So I would say the limitations are,
Mobile?
yeah, so there is, the cross-platform capabilities is just across Linux, Mac, and Windows. So you can't do this on mobile at the current moment. I don't think there's an architectural limit to why it can't be on mobile, but it's not right now. I know that there's for mobile, there is a Kiwi. That's the main library for doing mobile applications in Python. The interesting thing about this is that it is effectively rendered in the GPU. So it's rendered using OpenGL in the back end. And so there's nothing stopping somebody from at some point building something that interfaces with WebGL and being able to essentially render this in a browser. Nobody's done the work, but it would be a kind of a cool application of the technology to be able to kind of have this kind of a server side and being rendered across the web to be able to do that, because effectively it could take advantage of that.
How important for you was graphics aspect of GUI, or did you consider full text GUI, text user interface architecture?
So initially, we didn't even have a UI. It was really just this engine that crunches through this code and spits it out the other side. As we developed more and more sophistication, we needed the ability to kind of change things, and now we're moving more and more towards building out our tool as almost like an integrated development environment with very specific tool sets that we need. So to give you an example, about 99% of the code that we convert for customers is automatically generated. That missing 1% is things that just don't match up, right? That don't have an equivalence, or that it's at a different level of abstraction. And so when we come to those things, we need kind of almost like a template UI where we can drag and drop and grab that template for that thing. So that's where we're kind of heading with our use of the technology, is kind of building out more of an IDE or an integrated conversion environment, as we call it, ICE, where we're trying to build that very specific tooling for the job that we're doing. Great. Well, thanks so much for your time today, folks.
Thank you.
Thank